What's up, everyone, and welcome to another week of Spike Down. As you can tell, it's not Seaside hosting, it's not Sean Garris, rather, it is I, Vansilli, probably the third best looking person that fits the job criteria for hosting right now, or unless Roy decides to host, and then I'm going to be the fourth best looking man. So Roy, it's actually quite awesome and an honor to finally be able to be back on a camera and a microphone with you. It's been such a long time since we had to share the screen together as talent. So I'm looking forward to this. How are you doing today, man?
Absolutely, man. I'm doing great, dude. It's a pleasure to be here with you, man. You're actually a legend. So I'm ready to go. I'm ready to introduce some of these teams, let people know what's going on with the Mid-Season Cup and what's coming up here for VCL in year number 2.
Hell yeah. Well, yeah, let's talk about it right now then. You just mentioned the Mid-Season Cup. Let's have a look at that bracket so we can actually have a talk about what's to expect for this week. Because at least as we're starting things off here, something that really hits me in the face is that we actually have a new team going in to the Mid-Season Cup. And this is Blend Esports themselves. They came in here from promotion, relegation, and they went through the whole gauntlet through the play-ins and played against teams like Resonate that also made it through. They played against Glazers, who are now known as Doughboys, and also Thinking Men in that 4-man or the 4-team bracket to make it through. So talk to me about Blade Esports. It's a team that's been around for the longest time in the collegiate scene, but I think for the new viewers, this is going to be some information that they're going to need.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've been following VCL, you probably will recognize some of the names like Okeanos and Monty. They were here in actually the first year. They ended up getting relegated out, unfortunately. But now they're on their way back. But, I mean, first things first, Blend, second collegiate team in Valorant to qualify for VCL. Shout out to the collegiate players. Shout out to the people running these programs. That is actually a very cool feat.
Why are you shout out looking at the sky like they passed away or so? Like, bless up.
Pour one nod. But no, I mean, you got to give respects, dude. That is such an awesome thing. Like collegiate, people were sleeping on collegiate for so long, calling it mid. Even in CSGO, everyone's calling it mid. And look at them now; they're competing among big dogs and some of the best players in the world. So it's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, even at the same time when you're looking at even Winthrop University for the first stage, they had some shaky starts, but still had some good results. They put in some great fights. They even had some of the top dogs actually being like, hey, we weren't familiar with your game. We still won, but we were expecting for this to be a walk in the breeze, and it wasn't. So I'm actually really looking forward to see how Bleed Esports are going to do in the Mid-Season Cup. And at the same time, as those players you mentioned, like Okeanos and Monsi, they're actually players that have been grinding not only in the collegiate scene, but also in like tier 2, tier 3, when everybody is trying to make it at the same time. So it's no names that you should be unfamiliar with, and they should still be good, a good team or a decent team that could make some heads turn. But at least for like some heads, like turning my head on something that I've noticed here is that we actually do not have any Thinking Men going into stage 2, and I think that's going to be the most surprising one for me, to be honest with you. As we were looking, Thinking Men, they grinded together throughout the open qualifiers as well, and unfortunately they played the qualifying game in the lower brackets against Doughboys, where they lost. So a little bit of a head-to-head matchup from that stage 1. And what happened to Thinking Man, pretty much, Roy?
I think they might have just used their brains a little too much. They might have just thought their way out of the tournament, to be honest. They were looking pretty convincing.
Roy, I'm supposed to be the one doing the dad jokes. Why are you doing
That's right. No, congratulations, by the way. You're officially you have the dad stamp now. You can say any joke you want. But
yeah, sorry, go ahead. Sorry for cutting you. Tell me about Thinking Man. Why? I wouldn't want to call this a failure, but why, unfortunately, do we not see them here in the Mid-Season Cup?
They just had a shaky start, and they just never really recovered. They had roster changes. They to be fair, they did have extremely tough matchups. I mean, even in the relegation tournament, it's not like they got blown out of the water, right? Like almost every single match that they played was like neck to neck. It was extremely close. It's just unfortunate they didn't show up that day. They didn't show up for the tournament, and they're out. They're no more Thinking Men. We don't like people who do. We don't like thinkers around here.
Yeah, so then it's the Glazers that actually beat them, made it through. They beat they beat Resident rather as well, and now they're in the run of 12. And I actually want to talk about this team a little bit more, being Dobros, aka the Glazers. Is this going to be a game that they could actually beat here going up against Core, QOR, because at this point, when you looked at the Glazers, when they actually qualified through by beating Resonate, Zachary actually came out with a tweet saying like, hey, you know, at least my duelist role isn't like as rusty or whatnot. So do you think we're going to see some role issues or role identities for Doughboys going into, or Doughbros rather, going into?
Yeah, not to be confused with the bros, okay? The boys, they don't got the dough, but the bros do, okay?
Exactly.
No, I mean, I've been pretty outspoken about their role, their kind of like role issues that they were having. It seems like their identity is pretty, like, they play very good Valorant. Like, they have great ideas, they have great setups. There's nothing inherently like flawed with the way they play. It's just they don't have that sort of oomph that you kind of see from some of the top teams, right? Like Mata on Moistek Shopify, for example, Koala, Noob, Nismo on M80, right? Like, these are just names off the top of my head. But they don't really have that. So Zachary's duelist has been sort of in construction for a bit. And to be fair, though, on his defense, towards like the end of the runs, it seemed like he was getting much more comfortable in that duelist role. And he's going to have to if they want to actually compete and challenge Core, who, in my opinion, is actually an extremely tough matchup for them fans. Because Core is one of the teams in Challengers that has a full-on roster, right? They have 5 players that have been together for a while. They're very developed in terms of strategy and map pool. They have a coach and they have an analyst. So they have a team of 7 people that are like actively working on to improve like their roster. And like they've been going consistently for a while now. So I am actually kind of nervous for Glazers personally. I think it's an extremely tough matchup for them. And they're kind of like mashed on every level. And they have the X Factor duelist.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one, Vance. It's a tough one.
Yeah, especially when you have to play against Core, where, you know, when players like Nerve have to activate, they'll activate, and then, you know, you're playing in a single elimination bracket as well, going to the mid-season cup. So for a lot of these teams going through from the run of 12 onwards, you know, you can't do any mistakes at all. So looking back at Dobros, you know, if there's going to be some role issues or they find comfort into it, they can't afford to make any mistakes. And there's other teams actually that can't afford to make any mistakes. Is if you're looking back at this bracket, there's 3 of these teams actually going into the mid-season cup that have gone through roster changes and are trying to make a big impact right away. So I want to go through these one by one, and then maybe at the same time we'll have a little bit of a pulse on your end here, Roy, to let me know who do you think won these in terms of these roster changes. Exactly, the roster shuffle. The biggest roster shuffle actually is going to be a game where they go head to head against each other. It's actually Winthrop University versus Fluffy Aimers. So on one end, Fluffy Aimers actually picked up Bones and Jonas 6 from YFP and dropped Will and Kempeki. For Winthrop University, he brought in Screwface and Ali instead of Moobs, sorry, and I like to call him Gooch 107, but Gucci 07. This, I think, for me personally, though, for Winthrop University, if I'm looking at this head-to-head, I think that Winthrop University kind of wins this one because I'm a huge Ali fan, and Ali is a controller. I've been watching him play since like the Northwood, the Red Bull Campus Clutch days, and I think he's a huge addition to the team, alongside of Screwface that's been mixing roles, as you saw in Challengers, between like IGLing, duelists that we know that he could do in the past, and also playing, I guess, more initiator roles when he was filling in for Lear over at Thinking Man. So Winthrop, for me, seems to be that complete team that could actually upset a team like Fluffy Aimer.
Yeah, I mean, one, I agree. I think they have definitely improved their roster. I think the addition of Screwface has kind of added this sort of internal structure, like kind of internal process that they sort of were lacking in the last season, to be honest, in Split 1. So I think Screwface will bring that. And Ali, I mean, Ali's a monster, man. That guy is like, there is like this trend of like these emerging, yeah, I mean, yes, like, you see the trend, like 10s on controller top fragging, right? Like almost all the control. We're no longer in the era of supportive controllers. Okay, we're moving into like star player controllers, and like Ali is like a great star player controller, right? And you put him into a system with Screwface, and you have like Jurek, Nazi, and Infiltrator, who are also, you know, all pretty strong players themselves. I think we have a great recipe. The only concern for me is like the time constraint, right? Like they've recently made roster changes. Like how much practice do they really have? Have they figured out the roles? Like what are Screwface's roles are going to be like with Nazi's roles? Like who's going to play flex? Who's playing info? Like there are some things they need to sort of tinker and figure out. But I think once they do, they're going to be looking extremely promising. I just don't know if they're there yet. But on the other hand, for people that don't know, Fluffy Aimers is TWT. They just rebranded, and they obviously made a couple roster changes as well. So I mean, my intuition says Fluffy Aimers are favored in this matchup for now. Okay, that's a big asterisk for now. I think Fluffy Aimers have the upper hand. But again, it's really a toss-up. It could go any way, and we really have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about time constraints that Winthrop University has, I really feel that Fluffy Amorous has the same thing as well, right? Because we talk about these roster changes where, you know, it wasn't a direct trade, as I mentioned before. It's Bones and Jonah 6 that comes in from YFP. But if you're going to compare Bones and Jonah 6 from a head-to-head comparison to Fluffy Amorous dropping Will and Kenpeki, then do you think these are actually good enough upgrades with the time constraints that you still favor it, or you still favor, rather, Fluffy Amorous against Winthrop?
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's a lateral change. Like, it's really hard to say if it's like plus or minus. I think it's just like a sideways thing, and we really won't know until they show us, to be honest. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, well, at least we'll talk about YFP then, right? Because if they lost Bones and Jonah 6, they actually picked up Will from Fluffy Amorous and also Jake previously from Cloud9, right? And let's give a little bit of background about Jake as well. So Jake, you know, he played 1.5 years of Premier over into VCTs. Unfortunately, got dropped, where you saw now Rooney and Moose joining Cloud9. Yep. And Jake was at a point. Big Bean was like, "Hey, I'm actually going to retire," but I think there was some sage advice that came out of, like, for example, we did out of the tweets, and now we get to see Jakey compete again, which I love to see. And I also think that this is a great lateral move as well for YFP. You know, losing Bones and Jonah, but adding Will and Jake. I still feel that Will maybe hasn't had like the same type of like jet op consistency as I see from everybody else, but I still think like as a rifler, as a space maker, and also with you mentioned a team that has great support. I think YFP has that as well, and I think they have great utility that will be able to support Will, no pun intended, into doing his role as a duelist. So I think these are actually great additions, and I want to know your thoughts about it.
No, I think I agree. I actually feel like YFP might have won the roster mania going around right now.
Okay.
I mean, I think Will is a great pickup. He's not like the world's flashiest duelist, but he's an extremely fundamental duelist, and he's a lot more cerebral than some of the other duelists around. He has he's very fundamentally well constructed, right? He's been on 100 Thieves, he's been on multiple teams, he's been competing at a pretty high level for a while now. And then obviously Jakey's come from like a very structured system with Vanity, and I mean, he's been competing at a very high pressure environment for a while. I think the sort of like step back is going to be a very good opportunity for him to like fill the holes and develop the little things that he was lacking in his gameplay. But I think, I mean, that we say that, but I think Jakey's going to be an absolute monster in VCL. I think you cannot sleep on his impact. I think he's going to be popping off like crazy.
I think that's how it started too, right? How even Big Bean was scouted in the first place, because he was grinding and owning and farming over in a tier 2 scene and collegiate and whatnot.
Yeah, collegiate on top, dude. I'm telling you.
And then finally gets picked up for Cloud9 to be the controller player over at Cloud9. So I think this is a great way to like get back into it. If you're looking at it from bouncing back, at least for me from an outside perspective, when I'm looking at Jake and like he's bouncing back between retiring and coming back, I definitely do think that there's like a mental aspect over to it where like all the pressure that you had over at the partnership program over at VCTs maybe got to you at some point where you're like, oh, you're doubting your skills. But I think this is a great way to ease back into it by competing in challengers, playing in the mid-season cup, owning it, and then it's the revenge arc. You know, hopefully we'll have a chance to see Jakey back over at the VCTs. So I like that you brought this up here, Roy, that you think that YFP are the ones that actually won here, this roster shuffle going into the mid-season cup, and they have to play against TSM. So I want to know your thoughts now on TSM in itself. Like, are they looking at the past stage in stage 1 and into their mid-season cup in a round of 12? Are you impressed by TSM? Is there anything that's missing out of TSM, or can they actually have a run and make it through to the top 4?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush. TSM did have a pretty disappointing finish in stage 1, to be honest. They finished 7th to 8th with 4 points. I mean, I say disappointing considering their lineup, right? Like, they have a pretty all-star lineup, like very well-known names. It's not like there's somebody on the team that's a complete rookie, right? Like, they're all pretty experienced players. But I think from me, is like TSM, their only enemy is time, and like as time goes on, they're only going to like that is, I say their enemy, but in the beginning of stage 1, it was their enemy, but now it's kind of their ally, because where they have time to develop. They have not had roster changes. Like, realistically, the only thing they were missing were those little kind of like just like role awkwardness and like role things, but these are getting ironed out. Like even towards the end of the season, they were looking much better. And I think since then they've been even practicing. Like as long as they don't have any internal issues or like some sort of things that you and I are not like psychic readers about, I think they're gonna be the dark horse of this tournament, to be honest. And I think they're gonna be proving a lot of us like wrong.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to CTSM. I mean, this is a lot of pressure for sure because you represent such a big org. But at least in terms of what you're mentioning that they're practicing, I think you're right on that as well. I had a chance to actually see GMD, I think like 2 or 3 weekends ago. I think it was week number 5 of the VCTs. He actually flew into LA, so he came to the VCTs, watched some games with the coach, with Faded, and we wanted to go hang out, but they're like, no, we got to practice like 24/7. No, but they're just telling me like we gotta practice the whole time. I was like, yo, what about partying, bro? And they're like, nah, man, we gotta win the mid-season
lock
cup.
in. Yeah, you gotta lock in.
Exactly. So I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully they lock in and get to that point. And at least now when you're looking, we had a chance to mention, at least on the other end here, Blinn making it now to the mid-season cup and now joining the rest of the rosters into challengers. Do you think that they have the best possible scenarios looking at this bracket to make it to the top 4? Because the teams that they have to beat to make it through would be SAT Esports, and if they win against them, they have to play against TTR. TTR also has been, ups and downs in terms of like roster changes or trying to figure stuff out from week after week.
Yep. I mean, first of all, shout out to Turtle Troop. Most underrated award goes to them. We all slept on them. We knew they were kind of a top team.
Agreed.
But we didn't think they were a first seed kind of team, which is insane to think about. So shout out to them. Yeah. I mean, things for Turtle Troop did get much better once they like swapped their roles around, right? Like, or their comps, not even their roles. It was just their comps. They were really weird. Then as soon as they like in the middle of the season, they swapped up their compositions on some of the maps and like, dude, like snap your finger, boom, their performance changed tenfold. Like they're only I will add one more irrelevant point here. Their only loss in the season was to Winthrop University. That doesn't even make sense. They oh my God, it's crazy. It's insane. It's insane. Okay, anyways, enough waffling. So we're gonna get back into it. So Blinn, I don't know. It's a tough one, Vance. It's a tough one. Yeah. They have, first of all, they got to get through SAD Esports, who have been a very unorthodox team to play against. They're very hard to prep against because they play such a off-meta play style. Even when they're running meta comps, fans, they're still playing an off-meta like comp, like setups. They're the way they spread out, the way they play the game, their pacing is just like very different than what you're used to. So they are kind of a hard team to get through. So that's their first challenge. And then they have to go against Turtle Troops, which obviously they are the first seed team, and they're looking to continue their dominance here in the midseason cup. So it's tough. And even to make top 4 is good, but even to get to grand finals, they got to get through M80 after that. So it's you're optimistic.
So you're already
man.
assuming that M80 is going to make top 4.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that the way they ended their season was a little too disappointing, even for them. And I think that's going to like light a fire under them, and they're going to come in with insane levels of vengeance going into this event.
Yeah. Well, at least for Blinn, if they make it through to SAT Esports, but they can't versus Turtle Troop, but they make it to the top 4, that's a great start, right? Because
for sure,
you need 4th place at the minimum in the mid-season cup to actually get some points going into the circuit. For the finals, right? For the playoffs. So, you're already joining the tournament and you're already joining the league rather mid-season, no pun intended again. And that's a very, very tough and uphill battle or steep hill that you're going to have to climb for Blinn Esports to even make it to playoffs at this point. So yes, it's nice that you've made it, but the experience is another thing. But if you're trying to find results, it has to be very, very, very quick. So all the best. I hope the best for Blinn Esports too, but I do agree with you. Again, SAT Esports, with the way that they play, when they have Kohlberg and they have Bob, it's a very, very hard team to beat overall.
For sure.
But at least if you're looking at it then back at the bracket, is it just written in stone for you that whoever got the bye in a round of 12, so we're looking at MXS, Oxygen, M80, and Turtle Troop, are these the 4 teams that are just going to make it to the semifinals as well, beating whoever's going to make it to the round of 12?
I think at least 3 of them are. I mean, despite Turtle Troop's performance, and I'm going to eat my words. I know it. We did. You can hold me accountable. I will accept it if I'm wrong. Okay, I will take it. I'll hold the L on top of my head. But I think Turtle Troop's the only one in my mind that is like in question, to be honest. Most like Shopify looked like the best team in the tournament by far, in my opinion. It wasn't even in question, to be honest. Their setups are great. The way they play is great. They're a very well-rounded roster. They have oomph in every role that they need. They're a very well-constructed team. And I think they're going to keep that consistency going here. So in my mind, Moisa Shopify is locked in for the semis. Oxygen, they looked a little shaky. I mean, when they were playing great, they looked like one of the best teams in the tournament, period.
Yeah.
But when their variance is like a little kind of like worrisome for me, to be honest, because they're playing at a level where it's like, what is going on here, right? And it's like you can't have that kind of level of variance if you want to be a top 2 or top 1 team in the league. And then M80, obviously, they've been consistent throughout the entire tournament. They played extremely well
last year.
Yeah, literally through every roster iteration, they've been insane. So I mean, M80 is pretty. I think, again, I'll hold the L if I'm wrong. But in my mind, they are locked in. Turtle Troop is just like, I don't know. Did they close out the season well, and now they're like, what's happening with them? Have they swapped their comps? Are the roles still the same? Like, what are they going to keep up the same level of performance they were putting in towards the end of the season? Like, there's just a little bit of question marks for me. But I think, Moist, Oxygen, M80, the big three, I think those are locked in for top 4. And then in the bottom of the bracket, who knows, man? Who knows?
And actually, even looking back at M80, like when we're talking about teams who are challenging them, Winthrop University was one of them. Remember, one of those games was like a 13-11 to win that M80 had versus Winthrop. So, or Winthrop rather, as you say, like there's a heavy top 3. The competition behind that is still very, very, very close going into it. But I guess now it's the hard-hitting question into the top 3. So if you're looking at the top 3 on one side of the bracket, then you're going to have MXS versus Oxygen potentially here for that first semifinals. Who's making it to the grand finals and why?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot for the future?
Always, man. That's how I roll, dude. I just like proving you right or wrong, depending what you predict.
Okay. I like that. I like to be held accountable.
Man. While you think, it was also pretty funny too, because every time I predict against Turtle Troop or TSM, I get like a subtweet from like we did or GMD, specifically.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
And they just talk crap about me all the time. I love it. But anyways, go ahead. So OXG versus MXS. Who wins this one to make it to the grand finals, assuming everything goes according to plan and everybody follows the Challenger script?
If I'm projecting the way they looked in their last public appearances, I'm going to go ahead and say Moist as Shopify wins that. If Oxygen has tightened up in the last month, in the last couple of weeks, it's honestly a 50-50. But based on previous trends, I think Moist just looked a lot more consistent, and that consistency is just like the thing that I always base things off of. It's like who can win out, the averages. And it looked like Moist like Shopify was a little bit more well constructed in that regard.
Yeah, I do agree with you into that one as well. I also did enjoy, though, the nice little Redox versus Mata battle with the raises on, what was it, Bind a couple of weeks ago when you're like satcheling and dodging rockets. I'm starting to see that into VCTs too now as well. So I love that we have that little storyline that started off here with the challengers, and people can just talk about or it's the Redox ult or the Mata ult and stuff like that as well. So I think that's going to be a pretty fun matchup to witness and watch. And I do agree with you that I'd probably go with MXS at this point on one end. And it's probably going to be an MXS versus M80 grand finals at this point. And again, to your point, when M80 looked very consistent throughout roster changes and how they looked, at least for the performances thus far at stage 1, there's a possibility definitely that M80 is that team to beat. And they were that team to beat last year as well, right? It only came down to the grand finals of Ascension, or at least throughout once we got into LAN for Ascension, that they started losing games to the Guard back then. And if not, it was always M80 all the way. So I think that's why for me, I'll look at my predictions at the grand finals. I'm probably going to say that it's going to be M80 all the way as well, to secure the maximum points, which I think it's 6 circuit points that you get for first place, and $11,000. I mean, that's not too bad looking at the online season for stage 1 for the VCL. And I want to know, do you agree with me on M80, or are you going for MXS?
Oh, like who's going to win the grand finals if it is M80 versus MXS?
Yep.
Oh, that's my brain. I don't think it's wrinkly enough to predict that far ahead. It just doesn't have enough creases, man. It's just not big enough. It's a tough one, though. It'll be a nice one for sure.
Right? Like, can anybody make it through outside of these teams, outside of the top 3? Can you think about any other team that can make it right now to the grand finals?
Listen, I made the mistake of sleeping on Core before. I'm not going to sleep on them, to be honest. I also feel like Blinn is low-key kind of insane. Like, They play very good Valorant, man. They didn't fluke their way here. They've been extremely dominant in almost all their matches. Like, they're only losing like here and there very, very rarely. So I think Blinn is, if people are sleeping on them and they don't really know what to expect coming in from Blinn, I think they could catch a lot of these teams off guard. So top 4, it's kind of unknown, to be honest. Top 2, I think we'll probably see at least one of the top 3 teams in there, probably Moist or Oxygen, depending on who's kind of showing up here. But yeah, I'm here for the cinema, man. I'm here for prove me wrong. I'm here for that.
Tough games to call, tough games to predict, but at least we'll have a chance to witness all of that unravel. And that's going to start here on May 15th. So make sure you tune in to the Knights and also get to watch our wonderful talent for Challengers unravel all that action for you all. So with that, I think that's going to end this week of Spike Down, and we'll catch you in the next iteration. Peace out.